The Viking Way, Part 2. After completing my first 7 stages of the Viking Way, from Hessel to Lincoln, see Part 1 for more details, I then spent a few happy hours exploring the beautiful city of Lincoln and generally soaking up the atmosphere there. Lincoln. Lincoln Cathedral seen from the street in front. I couldn't believe my luck. Not only was entrance free, but no one tried to stop me from taking photos of this glorious edifice. I chatted to one of the volunteers for ages, and she filled me in on the history of the cathedral and entertained me with amusing anecdotes from her time as a volunteer. One of the legends involves the so-called Lincoln Imp, which is a cheeky half-human, half-animal stone carving inconspicuously located high up on the north side of the Angel Choir. There are many versions of the story about how it came to be there, but they all say that the imp was sent by the devil, who was jealous of the beautiful building, to wreak havoc in the cathedral. When the imp refused to stop, an angel appeared and turned it to stone. It now serves as a constant reminder about how good always triumphs over evil. It has subsequently become one of Lincoln's most iconic symbols, representing resilience, creativity, and a good dose of playfulness. Replicas of the imp can be found all over the city, often in the form of door knockers. Lincoln Castle, home to one of the 4 original copies of the 1215 Magna Carta and one of only 2 remaining copies of the 1217 Charter of the Forest. The 0.75 medieval wall walk along the castle's curtain wall provides visitors with interesting information about the history of Lincoln and has spectacular views across the countryside surrounding Lincoln. The tourist office in Lincoln. Lincoln Cathedral is on top of a very steep hill, and getting up there can be a challenge for some tourists. This street is aptly named Steep Hill, and it is actually much steeper than it looks in this photo. Part of the city centre. The River Witham as it flows along waterfront with the empowerment sculpture in the background. This modern sculpture, which was designed by artist Stephen Broadbent, echoes the shape of turbine blades in recognition of Lincoln's rich engineering heritage. It shows 2 figures reaching out to empower one another, just like turbine blades do. Day 8, Lincoln to Navenby, 14.6 miles. After leaving Lincoln, the trail climbs steeply up onto a limestone escarpment and the so-called cliff villages, which lie strung out along the South Lincolnshire edge. This surprised me because, once again, I hadn't expected hilly stuff. Here is one of the first views from the cliff. View from the cliff village of Colby. Another lovely early morning view from the cliff. Day 9, Navenby to Carlton Scroop, 15.6 miles. A house with a pretty lavender border in Wellinghall. The cliff villages were absolutely charming, but the walk was somewhat ruined by the constant noise from jet aircraft flying in and out of RAF Wellinghall. Most of the 15 miles I walked on day 8 was along the old Roman road, Ermine Street, which also runs past our home in Cambridgeshire. Serendipity. Ermine Street. The rain kept off for the first half of my day, but it drizzled constantly during the second half and became torrential just as I arrived in Carlton's Group. The Church of St. Nicholas, Carlton's Group, which provided me with welcome refuge from the rain while I was waiting for my bus. Day 10, Carlton's Group to Long Bennington, 14.5 miles. Pit stop scenery about 3 miles into my walk out of Carlton's Group. I was fascinated by the heads on the ends of the pews in All Saints Church in Westborough. Crossing the River Witham at Westborough. Day 11, Long Bennington to Skillington, 17.7 miles. Crabapples between Long Bennington and Woolsthorpe. Although edible, crabapples, which are native to the UK and usually found growing wild in hedgerows, are rather tart, so they are most commonly used for making cooked edibles such as crab apple jelly. This section of the trail, which runs for many miles, is notoriously bad, even in good weather, due to the massive ruts caused by heavy-wheeled vehicles. This is one example, but there was worse to come. And wow, a wooden stile, a rare sight these days. After 8 miles, I reached the now defunct Grantham Canal and walked along it for about 1 mile. It was so peaceful there, and the sun came out to enhance the ambience. Swans on the 33-mile-long Grantham Canal, which used to link Grantham to Nottingham and the River Trent. Restoration of the canal is an ongoing project. Bulrushes growing along the Grantham Canal. Bulrushes have astringent, diuretic, emmenagogue, hemostatic, refrigerant, sedative and vulnerary properties, and also make great decorations. Longmoor Bridge crossing the Grantham Canal. Leaving the canal, the trail crosses the bridge and heads due south again. Sweet chestnuts. Unlike horse chestnuts, which are toxic for humans, roasted sweet chestnuts are edible, but most have to be imported as the British climate is too cold for them to ripen properly. I just had to step past this sign where the trail crosses the A607 so that I could say that I have also walked in Leicestershire. After this point, much of the route runs along the boundary between Lincolnshire and Leicestershire. After the Grantham Canal, the trail runs for miles along Sewstone Lane, also called the Drift, which is an ancient trackway. It is also an SSSI containing some of the rarest rich limestone grassland in the country. I imagine that the wildflowers along it would be stunning during the summer. Here is some greater knapweed, which was still flowering. Greater knapweed has been used traditionally for treating flesh wounds, sore throats, bleeding gums and catarrh. I loved this sign. Just to the north of Buckminster, I had to divert off the trail for about 1 mile to Skillington because it was the only place offering accommodation for miles around. Day 12, Skillington to Greetham, 13.5 miles. I was going to go the whole hog and finish the trail on day 12 by walking a massive 20+ miles, but I decided to stop halfway at Greetham for several reasons. A. The weather was foul when I set out, and although it improved during my first hour on the trail, it was forecast to be dire later on in the day. B. Locals were warning me that the trail was closed in several places and that diversions were in place which would mean extra mileage. C. I wanted to end the trail in decent weather, so that I could enjoy the last stage along the northern edge of Rutland Water. And D. I also wanted to arrive at Oakham Library while it was still open, so that I could sign Yggdrasil, the book that can be signed by people who have completed the trail. Yggdrasil is the tree of life in Norse mythology. This turned out to be a wise decision due to the state of the trail for much of the way, as you can see from the typical example in this photo. Here is another example of the challenging stage of the trail. I had to cross this massive field, which was very wet and claggy after all the rain, and there was no sign of where the trail runs. Fortunately, I was able to use my OS app to navigate my way across. Afterwards, I met the friendly farmer on his quad bike, and he apologized for the lack of trail markings, saying that they had cultivated the field the previous day and had not had time to mark out the trail. Day 13, Greetham to Oakham, 14.2 miles. Leaving Greetham early in the morning. After about 4 miles, I arrived at Exton, which is said to be the prettiest village in Rutland, so I spent some time wandering around and taking loads of photos. Here are a few of them. The Church of St. Michael and All Angels, Whitwell. Yippee! The moment when I arrived at Rutland Water and connected with the Hereward Way. It was also the point where I joined up my steps in a continuous line from just across the Scottish border at Kirkgetholm and all the way down to Land's End. The line connects up 12 different trails, in other words, the Pennine Way, Wainwright's Coast to Coast, the Cleveland Way, the Yorkshire Wolds Way, the Viking Way, the Hereward Way, the Peddars Way, the Icknield Way, the Bridge Way, the Great Stones Way, the Avon Valley Path, and the Southwest Coast Path. Here I am, experiencing a feeling of deep satisfaction. I then walked my final 5 miles along Rutland Water, a man-made reservoir, to Oakham, the county town of Rutland. This sign shows that the Viking and Hereward Ways run together for a few miles along the northern edge of Rutland Water. The Buttercross in Oakham, which is also featured in my account about the Hereward Way. It was traditionally used for selling dairy products and possibly also as a preaching cross. Oakham Castle, which was also featured in my account about the Hereward Way. The interior castle walls are adorned with some of the 230 plus horseshoes from royalty and peers who, according to tradition, were required to present a horseshoe to the lord of the manor on their first visit to the town. All Saints Church, Oakham. Cultivating my inner Viking at the end of the Viking Way outside the library in Oakham. This is Yggdrasil. I added my name to the book, which is signed by people who have walked the whole of the Viking Way. Like a true nerd, I counted all the entries since the book was started in 2014. There were 130 entries in total, and only 22 entries for 2024, up to the end of September. This just shows that the Viking Way is a relatively quiet trail. I didn't actually meet a soul walking it during the whole 13 days of my walk. Once again, I walked in splendid isolation. Obviously, more people do walk it, but not everyone signs the book. Maybe because they don't know about it, or because the library is closed when they complete it. Lessons learnt. Lincolnshire is surprisingly hilly, with huge contrasts between the wolds, the fens, and Lincoln itself. I was very excited when I heard that otter numbers in Lincolnshire have increased in recent years, and that they have been found in all of the county's watercourses. However, despite the potential, I once again failed in my long-standing quest to see an otter in the wild. The Viking Way takes its name from the Norse invaders and settlers who occupied a vast swathe of eastern England, extending from London to North Yorkshire between the late 9th and early 11th centuries. The region became known as the Danelaw, which refers to both the geographical area and the legal system, and which came about as the result of a partition treaty entered into between King Alfred and the Viking invaders in 886. Lincolnshire is right in the middle of this region, and the area has many interesting Viking remains. See also Part 1 for my account of the first half of the Viking Way, from Hessel to Lincoln.